Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Nancy Andrews, and I'm with the Low Income Investment Fund, and it is an absolute pleasure to get to be here in Chicago, to get to see all of you, and to have the opportunity to get to know these amazing panelists and to hear about what's working in Chicago. We just had, I think, a conversion experience in the last panel because we had Eeyore, jaded, doom and gloom. And by the end of that panel, Eeyore was sounding a little optimistic and positive. So, I think that was great. But this panel is really going to be focusing on ideas that work. We want to showcase some examples of what's working here in Chicago to address poverty, particularly in integrating people and place-based results. And I am joined here by four distinguished people. We have Nelson Soler, who is the director of the Milwaukee County Community Business Development Partners. We have Maria Kim, who is the chief operating officer of the CARA program. We have Bernita Johnson-Gabriel, who's the executive director of Quad Communities Development Corporation, and Calvin Holmes, who is the executive director of the Chicago Community Loan Fund. And I think I get to be the world premiere announcer. I don't know. Anyway, I want to announce that Calvin was just appointed by President Obama to the Community Development Advisory Board. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The way we're going to do this panel is what I want to do is I want to create a lot of energy and I want to create a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. And so I want to do that by having a moderated conversation. So what that means is I'm going to be posing the questions to the panelists, but I will encourage them to interrupt, to disagree with one another, to take different points of view. If I pose a question to Calvin and Nelson wants to jump in on the conversation, I really encourage that and want you to feel comfortable doing that. And if any of you guys want to challenge me, by all means, come back at me. And then we'll turn it over to the audience, and we want to get the audience engaged in this as well. But before we get into that, I do want to let each one of you spend a couple of minutes talking about your model, what it is that you're doing that you think is working in communities, and if you could just touch on maybe the three things, the three pieces of evidence or the three measures or the three ways in which you benchmark what you're doing that helps you know that what you're doing is really making a difference. Calvin, we're going to pick on you first and start with you.
Sure, great. Thanks, Nancy. Good morning, everyone. So for those of you who know me well, you know that I'm usually a very ebullient guy. So if I'm a little bit more measured this morning, please forgive me. Typically, every Father's Day weekend, I spend it with my dad in Los Angeles at the Jazz Festival. And in spite of my best efforts to get an earlier flight out of LA yesterday, I still did not arrive back in Chicago until very early this morning. So I'm going to do the best job I can to project my normal level of energy. But I want to start out by thanking Nancy and David Erickson for being the conveners of the book. I have not been able to read all of it. It's rich and dense and really compelling. But there are lots of great chapters, lots of great segments, lots of great ideas, lots of great vignettes, and I really do appreciate the work. And hopefully it's the kind of call to action that not only gets us as practitioners, but lots of the other policymakers as well as the agencies moving in the right direction and working in collaboration with one another so that we can actually make a material difference in reducing poverty and improving lives across the country. So great work, really do appreciate it. And then secondly, for having me on the panel. It's great to be a part of it. We do appreciate the work that we do at the Chicago Community Loan Fund and always enjoy the opportunity to talk more about that to our stakeholders. So one of the things that is unique about my agency in the landscape of community development financial institutions is that we were actually created about 22 years ago to be a gap filler. So it's a different kind of business model, Nancy. At the time, most of the community development lending units of the major national commercial banks existed and were quite active. I'm pleased to say in Chicago that in spite of some of the data that we see, they still are quite active. And there were also a number of other larger community development financial institutions. So our organizing board members saw the need to create another CDFI that would try and serve markets that were either buildings or people or customer types that weren't getting the amount of attention from the other existing players. So it's been a unique and challenging business model, but what we found is that because of that challenge, that clarion call from our directors to make sure that we were serving as the safety net for community development finance in the region, that we were helping cover the waterfront for capital provision in LMI communities around metropolitan Chicago, we've been able to develop a diverse array of products. So as I was reading Investing in What Works, I was affirmed by a model that we've been working with for a number of years. And so that means that we can provide critical juncture financing for affordable housing, mixed income housing, community facilities, commercial retail, and social enterprise. A number of funds are relatively focused on a particular asset class or customer profile or building type. But from our beginning, we've had this ability to be more flexible, and that's allowed us to partner with lots of different types of community-level practitioners to help them succeed. So I told Bernita earlier that I was going to share with her the kind of work that we've done across silos in the Quad communities. And to her surprise, she didn't even realize just how much we've done in her own backyard. So over the last 2 decades, for example, CCLF has provided 30 transactions, 30 loans, over $13 million of financing across almost every imaginable asset class. So we've financed Six Flats, we've financed large multifamily apartment buildings, we've financed a senior cooperative building, we've financed a 93,000 square foot shopping center. We are hoping to break ground soon on the financing of a really unique restaurant concept that will have 4 to 5 healthier food restaurants in a part of Quad communities that is still relatively on the edge, and we hope it will be the leading edge there. We finance community facilities as well as social enterprises. So across multiple multidisciplinary activity streams, we are active in trying to support the work that QCDC is doing to make all 4 of those communities of choice. And because of our business model, we haven't been siloed, and we've been able to break out of the sort of norm of, dunk the donuts, only do one thing, and that's all you're supposed to do, and work in all of these different disciplines, which we think has helped make our communities more dynamic and to start to knock at the poverty rate. So that's just a little bit about how our business model has been successful. In terms of how we measure it, Nancy, like many of you, we'll be honest, the jury is still out. I think, and Bernita would agree with me as well as Maria and probably Nelson, prior to the Great Recession, the degree to which property values, property taxes, some repopulation was starting to happen in the Quad communities, we felt like we were winning the war. But quite frankly, the Great Recession has caused some retrenchment in that progress with the number of vacant lots, number of foreclosures, the extreme, particularly on the south and west side, reduction in property values. I think some of you from Chicago may know that in a number of more challenged communities, property values are down as much as 60% and haven't quite returned. And the market isn't signaling today that they're going to return anytime soon. So we're still working on how to make sure that we can measure that our 2 decades, 3 decades worth of work have completely paid off, but it hasn't deterred our enthusiasm to continue to collaborate and to work together to make our communities places of choice.
Fantastic. So Bernita, would you like to tell us a little bit about your program?
Good morning. Am I mic'd? Can you hear me?
Yes.
You didn't say good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, there you go. I am Bernita Johnson-Gabriel, the Executive Director for Quad Communities Development Corporation. And I'm always amazed when people want to hear about what we're doing. And I think a lot of it is because we were created to look at quality of life issues holistically. So we were never an organization that focused on any one thing. We've always looked at a broad scope of community issues, challenges, assets. And so I guess that makes us a little bit unique in the not-for-profit world. To give you a little perspective of what the Quad Communities is, everybody keeps saying the Quad Communities. What are the Quad Communities? Well, they're North Kenwood, Oakland, Douglas, and Grand Boulevard. And geographically, that means we're kind of bookended by McCormick Place and the University of Chicago. So we're lakefront communities, mid-south side. We were formed in May of 2003. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary through a partnership with the Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC, and the now Cook County Board President, Tony Preckwinkle, who at that time was the alderman of the 4th Ward. So we've been doing this work now for about 10 years, obviously through the New Communities program, which Terry mentioned earlier this morning. And basically that whole program or platform is designed, as I said, to look at all types of quality of life issues, bring folks to the table, collaborate, create solutions, work with each other on projects and programs, and focus on many areas at once. So that's what we've been charged with doing. My partner, who works with me on our employment side, runs our employment center. As Calvin said, we work together. So we feel that our model, although it's normal to us, because that's all we've known how to do, the model simply for looking at broad issues, being representatives for many or multiple residents, has been what has been successful for us.
Terrific. Go ahead. Maria?
Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Maria Kim. I work with an organization called the CARA program here in Chicago. CARA is a local nonprofit working with men and women affected by homelessness and poverty to basically help folks get and keep good jobs. I kind of have a closet desire to be on Oprah, so this is like my first foray in the little leather seat that swivels back and forth. But anyway, sorry, I got distracted for a second. So like Calvin, we were born about 22 years ago as well. Since our founding, we've placed about 3,500 individuals, again, affected by homelessness and poverty, into quality permanent employment. Our retention rate at 1 year of employment, when we talk about how we measure whether what we're doing works, is about 70%. Not is about, is exactly 70%, which is 20 points higher than what the Department of Labor reports for the same industries that we serve. So when we talk to people about working with us, we can certainly use the line of corporate social responsibility, but we also want to make sure that we're embedded in the economy and that we're saying it's important to work with us because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's in your economic best interest. So when I think about what are the 3 things that we do that help us to stay focused, I come upon 3 lanes that I'd like to share with you. The first is public-private sector partnership. We get the fact that unless our candidates are serving up well to our private sector partners that are hiring our students, the whole house of cards is going to fall apart. So unless our students are providing talent and quality talent at that for entry-level positions within the firms that we work with, then the whole thing doesn't work. So we have to make sure we're creating rigor in our training and creating wraparound services that stay with folks that are in the center that Bernita just talked about, folks that are in our downtown campus as well for at least that first year of employment and well beyond. We actually just got we do a golf outing every summer, and Northwestern Memorial Hospital purchased a foursome. And for their ad, you get a little ad in the book that's like our token of appreciation, right? So for their ad, instead of just saying, "Hey, Northwestern Memorial rules, thanks," the staff at Northwestern Memorial, they decided instead to take a picture of students that we placed at the hospital 12 years ago who are still there. So they took these pictures of, if you can imagine, I just got the ad PDF last week, and it's the 2 of them standing tall in front of the newest hospital, right, with a little placard underneath them saying the names and when they were placed at the firm. But when we think about, what does success actually look like, it's that picture, certainly. It's these statistics as well, but it's the picture of knowing that somebody in that level of gainful employment is radically changing not only their lives, but the life of their family and the life of the communities that they serve. Second lane that's important to me is, ironically, know your lane. We do jobs and we do job retention pretty well, but we can't do what Calvin does, and we can't do what Bernita does. And so we work very intensively with partners who are serving up candidates that make sense for our program, and partners that are providing lots of wraparound services in that critical first year of employment to make sure everything goes well. So housing partners, right? Folks who are focusing on childcare, folks who are supporting our students in their ongoing recovery if they're in recovery from substance abuse and addiction. But we get the fact that our lane is jobs and job retention. We're going to focus on that And then we're going to plug into all these folks at the alpha and omega that can help us make sure our students stay long-term successful. Third lane is nonprofit is a tax state, not a state of mind. I'm a big believer in this statement. And I can't stand, like when I first switched into this work about 8 years ago, when I tell people what I do, like, oh, I work for the CARE program, we work with homeless adults to help folks get back into the workforce, I get a lot of, oh. Do you know? Do you guys that are in this work, do you get that? Like, oh. You know, kind of like, you're doing God's work, and isn't that wonderful? And I want to crawl out of my skin because effectively we are operating as a for-profit. We have to make the same cost containment decisions, the same process improvement decisions, the same brutal staffing decisions in order to make our design actually sustainable and the mission actually sustainable. We just happen to reinvest our dividends in a different way. So I hate when people give me that look like it's cute, because it ain't cute. It's serious, and together we need to work together to really lift up and create sustainable solutions for poverty alleviation. So those are my 3 big lanes that I think about.
That was terrific, and I guess it means I have to be Oprah. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You have to channel her for
Oh dear, we're in trouble.
You're up to the job, Nancy. You look fabulous.
So Nelson, please tell us about your work.
Yeah, my name is Nelson Soler. I crossed the border this morning from Wisconsin. 5:30 in the morning. Just so you know, I'm not from Chicago.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm the director of what we call the Community Business Development Partners in Milwaukee County. It's a government office, so I'm a little bit different from the 3 individuals that are with me. And I have focused my career in the last 10 years to build collaborations as well. But what makes this office a little bit different is that we focus and believe that economic empowering comes from 2 different sources. We go beyond the real estate, the housing, and think that entrepreneurship and education, and we view education a little bit different, are extremely important for economic empowerment. And within those systems, in the entrepreneurship area, we had to look at gaps and focus on gaps. I agree with what you said. We cannot do it all. And sometimes there's that tendency of thinking we have to do everything for everybody. And that's what gets us in the path of failure. We need to learn to identify what we're good at and either partner or delegate what we're not that good at, what we're so-so at. And that's one of the things we have been able to do. We have a revolving loan fund. We created a microloan fund to assist individuals that want to become entrepreneurs. We also address one of the biggest issues that we have in our market, which is also an elephant in the room, which is the incarceration of males. African American males in the city of Milwaukee, 50% of them are incarcerated before they reach the age of 30. We had the highest national per capita incarceration rate for African American males, 12.8. In the nation is 6.7. We also have that 1 in every 13 Native Americans are incarcerated in the state of Wisconsin. So those are issues that we need to tackle, and we created a program especially around, it was called the Task Force for Men, to address that issue. In addition to that, we have done a lot of things, but I know I don't have a lot of time. We also focus in believing, or we believe, that we not only have to provide individuals with the opportunity to access capital or finance, but also to get an opportunity. The best way to finance a new business is to get a contract. And we foster that opportunity for individuals to do business with Milwaukee County. At the same time, we have tools that allow them to increase their business capacity. So our program is meant to be a terminal program in which businesses will come in when they're starting or they're emerging. They will get the support, technical assistance, they will get the access to capital, but they will also move on to the next level. And hopefully when they move on to the next level, they come back and help another business that also is interested in going through the same process. So those are the things that we had done a little bit different from my distinguished panels members. And we also, one of the things that I have personally pushed in my group is the fact that we need to address the elephant in the room. We need to be uncomfortable to be able to ignite change. And many people don't like to be uncomfortable. People don't like to talk about racism. It's not going to go away. It's still going to be here. They don't like to talk about segregation. They don't like to talk about immigration. We can go on with the list, but we need to address and talk about it candidly so we can come up with solutions. So those are the things I wanted to share. We have multitude of measurements. They're primarily quantitative, but I think that they're addressed as in a big picture what I wanted to address.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. All of us that have been working in this field of community development for many, many years have occasionally bumped up against things that surprised us. Maybe we started out trying to do things one way. As we got there, turned out perhaps something didn't work. We were surprised by that. And maybe the problem of things not working as well as we wanted sort of forced us into even stronger, better, more efficient, more effective practice. Calvin's organization has been around for
22 years.
22 years. Nelson, how long has yours been?
This one was formed about 9 years ago.
9 years. And Bernita, I think you said 10, right? And
22.
22, okay. So we have a range of about a decade to 2 decades. I wonder if each of you could just reflect on a couple of things that you have learned going down this pathway of doing what you do that has really meant a lot. I mean, what lessons have you picked up as you've sort of worked on these very, very difficult issues? So who wants to
Sure,
Calvin,
Nancy,
do you want to
I'm
go
happy
first?
to wade in there. So I think one of the things, especially of late as we are in a era of constrained resources that has surprised me is how much many of us don't believe in the role that smaller local visionaries play in our effort to rejuvenate our communities. So it's been interesting to negotiate those conversations because we're all trying to get to scale. We want to measure things in a way that allows us to feel that we have clearly moved the needle, if you will. However, at the same time, in that quest to get to this elusive definition of scale, it feels like we're often leaving people who are from neighborhoods, smaller agencies, small businesses, who are vested in that community, who have connections to people that they can hire within a very tight radius around their business or their store, who have a comfort level in turning dollars over in those neighborhoods. It seems like we're not completely comfortable with making sure that those folks are a part of the rehabilitation of their very own communities. And I was struck by what Nelson said when he said, sometimes you have to be a little uncomfortable. So we've adopted as a part of our business model that we are and can be a go-to for the smaller neighborhood-based and neighborhood-focused for-profit or nonprofit community development entity. And when we think of small, we're talking about companies that have total assets of $1 million or less. We just did an analysis of our current loan portfolio. There are about 150 transactions, 150 organizations in that portfolio, and 55% of those organizations are place-based, place-focused, local leaders who have annual operating budgets and or assets of less than $1 million. What we found is that there can be some really exciting successes. So let me give you an example. We recently financed a mother and daughter business. This is their first true commercial retail endeavor. They demolished a former medical office building in Chatham, and which is on the south side. For those of you who are not from Chicago, that's probably about 8 to 9 miles due south of downtown. And with a lot of technical assistance with CCLF helping them, they were capable people with lots of energy and lots of drive, but they needed to be connected to other resources to succeed. But this mother-daughter team, their first major enterprise, were able to build a 6,000 square foot auto parts store that is hiring 10 people who most could walk to work or take a bus ride to work or take their bike to work. And they have the kinds of skills that align with what that business needs. And the family is this mother-daughter team. They're actually getting measurable capital gains from this new enterprise. In this environment, when it comes to commercial retail finance for a small, if you will, de novo real estate practice, WBE, there was no place for them to turn. But because we have a philosophy about lending to local visionaries, we were able to underwrite and connect to help them find the missing pieces, to underwrite to these people. So when we're talking about how do we get to scale, investing in a local community business that can create 10 local jobs is part of the equation. It doesn't supplant and replace all of the other larger job-creating and wealth-creating activities that we're all engaged in, but it's a part of the formula. And so I encourage us, as we think about ways to have integrated community development, to think about having lots of different players of different asset sizes, building types, activities involved in our comprehensive community development strategy, so that we can start to really make a dent in poverty. We recently had our first annual stakeholders meeting on Friday, and to have just the images of this mother and daughter and her mother as a part of the celebration for opening this new facility was fantastic. So that's where I challenge us to go, is to not assume that you can only get there by working with large players, that creating and maintaining a role for local visionaries in the rehabilitation of our communities is an important function.
Great, that's terrific. Who else wants to take that one on? Bernita.
I came to this work from corporate, so this was a whole new world for me. And I think the things that I thought would be obvious to folks in this work just aren't obvious. I didn't tell you from our geography a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit more about the geography of my community. We are lakefront Southside communities, but we are also home to 5 of the 10 CHA or Chicago Housing Authority public housing transformations. So what that means is that at one time, these communities that I represent were very heavily populated with public housing. Those buildings have obviously come down now and are being replaced by wonderful mixed income communities. I think what has been a lesson learned and a challenge for us has been the fact that even with that, it's still difficult for people to understand that with mixed income communities, residents and stakeholders need the same type of amenities as any other community. They need quality schools. We need quality education for folks. You need amenities. People want to shop. They want to be able to go to the neighborhood, stay within their neighborhoods, and spend within their neighborhoods. So that whole healthy, vibrant community approach, I find it difficult that we're still having to sell what it is that these communities need. And in other communities, it's a given, right? So I think that part of our challenge is, over the last 10 years, we've been working really, really hard to make the case for communities. We've had some success. You may have seen probably in the paper 3 months ago, we broke ground on a new development right in the heart of the community at 47th and Cottage Grove. It will be anchored by a Walmart, which will be the first development in that community anchored by a national retailer in forever, probably more than 50 years. So one step in getting to where we need to go. But I think if I had to sum up some of the things that I feel have been challenges throughout this work, have been the ability to make the case that to create a strong, healthy, vibrant community, it's more than bricks and mortar in some cases. But then again, and for other communities, we do need different amenities to make it healthy.
Great.
Absolutely. For me, I think the big aha has been that social enterprise is not a panacea. So lots of folks that are in the nonprofit sector think, oh, whip open a social enterprise, i.e. a business, like to help generate revenue. And in our case, we had a dual mission to help generate revenue and jobs, right? Because we're a jobs organization, so we wanted to leverage our social enterprises to produce that type of employment for the students that we serve, the individuals that we serve. The reality is it's not a silver bullet by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm probably speaking out of school because we have a certain equity, I guess, in the marketplace where Kara kind of knows how to run with social enterprise. Maybe, is the true statement. Maybe is the true statement. We have 3 businesses. One is called Clean Slate. It's in 20 different communities throughout the city. On paper, looks good, generates about $2.1 million of revenue, and most importantly, produces about 200 transitional jobs per year, in large part for the population that Nelson was discussing. So folks who may have been recently incarcerated, folks who have multiple felony convictions on their record, folks who may have low cognition or limited work experience. We need them to have a transitional job on their resume so that an employer is not looking at a blank piece of paper, right? They're looking at something with currency. So Clean Slate is doing gangbusters as far as that's concerned, but it just eked its way into the black, and that thing was incubated in 2005. So we're just kind of becoming the promises of a sustainable operation, but it took a hot minute to get there. That's number one. The second business that we have, and I see my colleague is in the audience who's with our partner organization, with Mercy Housing Lakefront, we started a joint venture called 180 Properties. And it's a property preservation firm where we go into homes that are in foreclosure, we clean them out, we board them up, we mow the lawn, we take the pictures that the banks want, we do all that kind of stuff to be part of the community safety solution, right? But to also produce some top line revenue for the organization. That shows more promising top line numbers, maybe over $3 million in revenue, but certainly not in the black. And what began as a more real estate owned transactional revenue environment is now more of we've evolved into a rehab firm. And so we're billing once projects are completed, right? We're getting paid once projects are completed. And oh my gosh, that's doing a bit of a doozy on cash. That's doing a bit of a doozy on cash. And since, remember, we're not cute, this work isn't cute, we are essentially a for-profit organization disguised under mission-driven work, we have to create a solution that makes that business sustainable, and we're not quite there yet. We're still in the uphill climb. And the third business we have is something called TCP Staffing, which is basically a mini Manpower, if I were to kind of put it into basic terms. We knew that the hiring environment was shifting towards a more temporary employment as a first try before you buy, right, to break into the private sector. So we thought we want to get a piece of that pie and make sure our students are not missing out on those opportunities. So very recently, we just started that business. And again, way early to tell, right? And I guess my biggest piece of news for everybody is that oftentimes boards of directors sit around the table saying, social enterprise, especially in a depressed economy, we can come up with our own money by running our own business. And there's some truth related to that, but is it net profit? Is it cash? At what point does it become sustainable? These are conversations that you have to be provocative and, I guess, to use Nelson's term, uncomfortable enough to actually push back and make sure that you're looking at a business model and calling it what it is, really looking at it seriously to understand it is not the silver bullet that people may think, and the time horizon, just like building a house, is way much longer than what you anticipate it to be from out the gate.
So Marie, I've got 2 questions for you if I could. One, could you share with us the decision-making process that management team at Kara went through to convince your board to launch the new social enterprises and how they embrace the risk, right? Because there's obviously a lot of that. And 2, as your profitability timeline has been stretched out across the enterprises, how have you been able to keep your stakeholders and your funders on board with you?
Mm-hmm. You can ask Terry and others in the room that last question. We've definitely got sustainable work in that. So how do you get the board to kind of jump in? For us, unfortunately, I don't think that's our issue. The board is like, new business, it's a shiny new object. Let's go. So for us, it's like, you know what I mean? It's almost
you know she loves her board, right?
Right. I could say what's said in this room stays in this room, but as I understand it, we're being videoed, so there's that. So yes, there's a definite enthusiasm for social enterprise, but all joking aside, the reason why Clean Slate was able to launch in the way that it did was because we had really good partners as part of a quality life plan, as part of a from the ground up community partnership, and we had seed capital from private companies that were willing to take the risk with us. We also had a guy who was a managing director at Goldman Sachs do a 1-year fellowship with our program to help us really design the business, incubate it, and launch it. So to say that we did that on our own wings, it would not be a true statement. We did it because of board enthusiasm, because of private sector partnership, and because we had the technical kind of thought capital to help us launch that business in earnest. The second question, when the kind of dividend timeline stretches out a little further than you imagine, how do you keep your stakeholders engaged? Well, I think the first answer is you tell the truth about it. I think sometimes we have, again, some of this fallacy within the nonprofit work that you're only supposed to stay top line on all the stuff that's going really rosy and awesome. And the reality is there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work. Perhaps that's not the right theme to use in a What Works conference, but that's the truth. And I think telling the truth with your investors so that they understand that you're stewarding their investment in a wise way so that they remain faithful in the leadership of an organization, then they can assess their own risk as to whether they're going to kind of hitch their wagon to you until it turns to the positive. And so far, truth-telling has been to our favor.
So I want to actually pick up on a couple of things that you each have said as we started out the panel. Nelson talked about, Maria, you talked about staying in your lane. And Nelson, you talked about something along those lines about doing what you do well and knowing what it is that you do well. Bernita and Calvin both sort of talked about holistic, multidisciplinary work. And one of the things that we posit in this What Works book is that we need to have more integration in strategies. So help me sort of reconcile the difference between, or the apparent difference between sort of being really good at doing something, but also the need to look beyond your own particular pathway of what you're particularly good at. How do you react to the idea that we pose in the book of creating networks of organizations that are organized around an integrated vision? That question was not on the script, folks.
So Nancy, we, because of the uniqueness of our business model, have a philosophy that allows us to be really comfortable with these smaller players. And I think we get beaten up quite a bit for that from time to time. However, at the same time, because we were created to provide a set of loan products that intersect with larger projects and larger players for strategic initiatives, it allows us to still work with a different cast of characters, if you will, so that all of that we can plug into, if you will, a variety of different executions that work for disadvantaged communities, right? So we've got sort of a subject matter expertise, if you will, developing for the emerging to small organization. And we know how to work with them, we know how to help move them along, we know who to connect them to, right? So that's one stream of business that we've gotten pretty good at. It feels like with CDFIs we're always bragging about our charge-off ratios. Given that we lend to this population, we've only charged off in 22 years 2.5%, which is a pretty good rate given the population that we serve, right? And I'm proud to say, and my Vice President of Lending is here, Rob Rose, our current delinquency rate is less than 2.5%, which is great given the population that we specialize in serving. However, because we also provide pre-development gap and bridge financing, we can then plug into larger development efforts that may be driven by larger stakeholders or an entire array of stakeholders. So I'll give you an example of that. Along with List Chicago, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, and a whole cast of characters. I shouldn't call them characters, but sometimes it feels like that if you're in one of these lasagna financing deals. We were able to provide some upfront pre-development financing for the Wilson Yard project in Chicago's uptown community. So this is one of those projects where, to people who know us well, it might seem like an outlier. But because one of our functions in the market is to provide pre-development gap and bridge, that developer came to us for that particular product to pull off the shelf. We were excited to be a part of it because we know their capacity. We knew that it was going to be a multi-purpose, multi-function project, and it would become, hopefully, the economic anchor for a part of uptown that's long been underutilized, transit-oriented. The CTA was very much involved in that. The Alderman's office, Alderman Schiller at the time, was a huge proponent of this development. I think the city put its largest allocation of TIP funds into this deal ever. So you've got a large stakeholder energy level for this large project. At the end of the day, you end up with affordable housing, 178 units of senior and family housing. You end up with 375 jobs that are physically locally accessible and skill set locally accessible, you end up with 9 new retail businesses for a community that was under-resourced when it comes to goods and services. And you also get the benefit of a LEED Silver building that is saving 500,000 pounds of CO2 every year. And you've got a 441% increase in property taxes. So the ability to become a subject matter expert for a profile of customer that is underserved in the market while still being a resource for other larger, higher capacity companies is another way in which we try and make sure that we're working in a way where we have deep subject matter expertise. At the same time, we're able to plug into all of these other collaborative, integrated community development executions.
Anybody else?
I guess for you to be able to achieve integration, you need to be willing to be inclusive. And that's one of the challenges we face in large, organized historical communities in which we have the same leadership in the same meetings all the time. So in order for us to reach integration, we need to start tapping into emerging leaders, emerging business, and emerging nonprofits. And I think that's one of the things we have been able to do. Recognize that gap and recognize that they need to be at the table with us and not just far away as a future connect. And also, I think sometimes I work 1/3 of my life in private, 1/3 I run my business, 1/3 in the public sector. I think sometimes when we're in the non-public or in the non-for-profit sector, not for loss, but not-for-profit sector, we think we cannot influence policy. And I think influencing policy is extremely important. I think you mentioned, Calvin, that the alderman involvement. We cannot just be sitting back and focusing just on mission, but we also need to expand our views and ensure that we are inclusive in leadership, and that includes the public sector and the entrepreneurial sector, not the large corporations only, but also look at that fabric of new entrepreneurs who also want to be active in nonprofits and active in the economy.
I'm going to let Bernita talk, then I have one more question, and then I'm going to try to save 10 or 15 minutes for the audience. So anybody out there who's thinking they might want to ask a question, this is your prep moment. So Bernita, please.
I just wanted to give you a little bit of context about the New Communities program and what it was like. So it was a process of planning for about 18 months of bringing community together, bringing organizations together, bringing stakeholders, elected officials, all these folks together to plan for the community. And after that 18 months, it ended up being what was called a quality of life plan. So I have a blueprint of what needs to happen within our community. Now, does QCDC do all of it? No, we don't. We have partners. Those same folks who sat at the table planning with us are responsible for certain projects and programs. Where we focus, the organization, where the organization focuses right now is on economic development, education, and we have an employment partner. So all of the other aspects of the plan are really held by other organizations, and we kind of just shepherd and keep it all together.
So I'll give you a really... book you call The Quarterback.
Oh, am I? Really? Okay. My favorite is wide receiver, but okay. All right. But so to give you an example of how we try to collaborate and coordinate and how we try to think of economic development in just more than one area is that we were responsible for revitalizing a commercial corridor. So the residents said it's gray, it's bland, it's a place to drive through and not to drive to, it looks awful, what can we do? So we were responsible for the placemaking and the streetscape. So what did we do? We said, okay, we've got to have new banners to create a sense of identity. So what we did was we partnered with a local youth arts organization. And they were the ones that were responsible for developing the banner. So all of the streetscape that you see in our community, much of it was done by young people who were given that assignment. So that's a one way of how we take some of what we do and just try to integrate it with other organizations, and particularly bringing in youth. We do the same thing with our partners with housing. And a prime example of that would have been the development that we just did on 47th and Cottage. We had a commercial retail developer who knew nothing about housing, knew nothing about that market. We had a partner already in the community. We brought them together, and they were able to make that connection. So we are the quarterback, I guess you would say. We do not do all of the work. We definitely stay in our lane. We know what our areas of expertise are, and we have wonderful partners that help us with the remainder of the plan.
That's terrific. My final question to the panel before we get to the audience is, one of the things I've learned in my too many years in the field is a point that I think each of you made in a different way, which is that it doesn't take a gazillion-dollar organization to make a real difference. Scale can sometimes come simply by having small gains that happen by small players, as long as we have enough of them working. And we've learned that I think in the microenterprise world, internationally and in the U.S., that we're making small things, but if you have a large number of them happening simultaneously, it has a big impact overall. And so my question, and I think I have to limit this to just one person, so I'm going to pick on you, Calvin, is if you had 2 minutes with the man who appointed you to the Community Development Advisory Board, President Obama, and you could ask him for something that sort of lifted your vision about leadership and the role of communities, people in place, what would you ask?
So to the chagrin of my CDFI colleagues in the room, I'm not sure I would ask him for more money to support the ways that CDFIs can leverage affordable capital into high-poverty communities. I don't think that would be the number one thing. I think I would actually ask the President to think about ways that we could use the power of federal agencies to impact the human capital challenges in high concentrated poverty communities. I wanted to be an architect, so I'm a brick and mortar guy. But as I've been in the business now for quite some time too, the human capital challenges, I think, are the real frontier for all of us. And if we can get folks who have gotten tangled up in the penal system to have full and true rehabilitation, if we can allow them to unlock their potential so that they can be better fathers and better mothers and can hold down a job and a ladder, I think that for a lot of the communities that we care about, it would make a marked difference in their viability and their sustainability. And those are the kinds of things I would challenge the President to spend even more time on, is this human capital question that I think is really the next frontier for transforming our communities.
Thank you, Calvin. So we have time now, I think about 5 minutes, 10 minutes for audience questions? 15.
Oh, I'm going to take 5 minutes then. My name is Elena Duran, and I am a longtime resident of the Little Village community, 40 years actually. And I am Special Service Area number 25 Commissioner. The people in Chicago know what it is. So I'm a different take on what we've been saying today. Little Village is a thriving community, not just because I live there, and I actually live right on 26th Street. We have from the 3200 block, that's Kedzie, to the 4000 West, that's Pulaski. There are 6 financial institutions, and one is to open any time now, like PNC is going to open up in a couple of, I'm assuming, weeks. That's not our issue. We got vultures that come to our neighborhood. We had the vultures, they were the mortgage brokers, and those were the ones they trigger all the foreclosures that happen. But the other one that kind of bothers me, in Little Village, we don't have the problem. Well, it is a problem about unemployment or underemployment. If you go to Little Village, 4 o'clock in the morning, you see the people waiting at the day labor offices to work. People are always, I read and I listen to NPR and I watch PBS and all of those, and you hear about the exploitations that happen in India and other parts of the world. All they gotta do is come to Little Village and find out where those people are going to work for that day. They are exploited. Why? Because they don't have documents, proper documentation. So that's very easy for us to look the other way because the economy works. Because, those beautiful packages that we get in Christmas, like from Sam's Club, for example, those are wrapped, those are put together by people and day labor companies. They are get paid not just the minimum. They are exploited by the driver, the one that gives them the ride. They sit on milk crates to get to the job. This is in Chicago. This is not in another, third world country. This is right here. And in our community, the people are hardworking to keep wanting to maintain their properties. They do what they call non-traditional work. They sell, where gorditas are? The thick tortilla. Well, sometimes the people go to a factory, their trunk of the car, they got a cooler. They sell gorditas with the people that come out to lunch. This how they supplement the income because the husband either has one or two jobs or the lady has one or two jobs. And what irks me sometimes is how sometimes government are trying to figure out how to have jobs, how to create jobs. And in Little Village, the service industry, the people, they clean the tables, they sweep the floors, they work in the hotels. A lot of them live in Little Village. And you know what sometimes the government, one time, like CTA did, they said, we're going to cut down the service, the bus. Blue Island bus is line 60, if you want to know. You can get to Little Village and have wonderful food. You just take the bus. They said that we're going to cut the service at midnight. Midnight. Do you know that some of the people that work in the hotels or the restaurants around here, they close at midnight because they're cleaning. And they were going to cut one way an opportunity for the people that work in Little Village to get back home. Or the ones that were going to start early. 7 o'clock, they have to be on the bus by 5:30. My point is that a lot of times things are being said about how to generate this and how do we do this. But there are communities, they are working. And then Lady Jennifer, she was talking about like neighborhoods and how we can be creative. They have to be creative. They have to be types of microloans. They are different tiers. $1 million loans are great, but you know what? There's the street vendors on 26th Street that we could do a co-op, and these people will get very small loans at a very untraditional lending. So I wish they could just see that even though it looks like it's thriving, but in the background, there's a lot of exploitation happening in my community. But just to keep in mind, please, people, the ones that figure out all these great things and reports and all of that, think about a community that is thriving, but we have to address basically the exploitation and the vultures that come to our neighborhood and take advantage of our community.
Thank you for that comment. There was a lot wrapped in that. And let me just see if there's anyone on the panel that wants to address any of the points that were made. Ooh.
Well, I would just say, I think in terms of the consumer protections, the CFPB, the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau, is looking into ways that you can keep those kind of financial vultures from taking advantage of vulnerable populations. And Dory Rand with the Woodstock Institute is on that board, and they are being very prolific in terms of the number of rules and regulations that they're writing right now. And hopefully going forward, populations like that won't be taken advantage of.
Thank you. Other questions?
Okay. I don't know how to come after that, but here's the deal. My name is Monty Apostolos. I'm in education. Was with Chicago Board of Education. Now I consider myself what you call an education epidemiologist. And we talked about earlier the gorilla, the donkey, and whomever else is putting it out here. And I looked in the book, and as I perused it, I did see something very significant in the book that drew me to it, and that was about early childhood development. If we want to talk about prevention, we need to talk about education. And I know a lot of people don't like to talk about education, especially with the debacle in Chicago and probably across the country at this point. But what I see in the organizations that have been before us this morning, that's cause and effect. Your organizations are dealing with what probably happened as a result of the lack of education and good decisions that have not been made because of lack of good education. So my concern is the sustainability of communities based on starting with children and children making viable decisions and having the ability to make viable decisions. And what do I mean by that is oftentimes you see people who invest in the community or invest in education and those dollars, and I can say this after having been an administrator and a teacher, long term. So I'm serving on a think tank right now with the Willow Creek Church, and we're dealing with people from all over the country talking about this very issue. And the issue is that a lot of money is dumped into education but not used properly. The fact of the matter is we have children. To give you an example, in the classroom of 44 students, 20 of the students were crack babies. So we have children who are in these underserved communities who are just about written off from the beginning or not being serviced. A teacher can't teach a child who has a lack of having cognitive development if the health factor has not, psychological health factor. So what is happening in education right now in underserved areas where monies need to be invested is that it's called educational psychological genocide because these children have not been dealt with. And so they become later on, as a corporation, I want to invest properly because later on it becomes my liability. So what I would like to see happen is not the empathy factor or the conscience money that's invested into poor communities. I'd like to see real discussion about where that money should go. In the first place, where it should be developed is making these children healthy so they can make cognitive, viable decisions and can partake in the educational process.
Thank you. Is there anybody on our panel that would like to either resonate with that? Maria.
So I think it's by the luck of the draw that the composition of this panel is what it is today, and it's not necessarily a testament to the value that we're all placing on early childhood development and education over the long term. So please don't take that as a statement on that front. I'm very passionate about education, and I think as Bernita discussed in terms of the quality of life plan, we all believe that solutions for our communities are multifaceted, and that education is one component. It's a significant component. It's not the only component, and it plugs into this much larger equation of community development that needs to happen in order to rise all folks up. And I guess from our lens at CARA, we believe that a parent in the household who is gainfully employed, who is getting up and going to work 8:30 to 5 every day and doing all that good stuff, that the probability of those children who are raising up in that household and their commitment to their education will increase exponentially, and it will alter their outcomes for the future. I see that you're shifting your head that might not be the case. That is what I see anecdotally in the families that we serve. And it's frankly my hope that the investment in the leadership at the parents level and also the investment from the ground, from when kids are coming up, that both that alpha and omega helps to raise the family up.
I can say that we are participating in a program called Elevate. It's a national model through, I believe, 5 states throughout the country, and there are 5 schools in the city of Chicago that have the program. We have one at Revis Elementary School. And as to what we do at QCDC, it is totally comprehensive. So it deals with the supportive issues that children need. We have built a health center in that school. That health center serves the students of the school as well as their families. We have had additional social workers put into those health centers. We provide after-school programming as well as professional development with the teaching staff in the school. So it is designed to work with that child holistically. What we found when we did the health center, we were amazed because we thought that it would really be a place where people would go with, boo-boos and I got a scratch and I got a this and I got a that. And we were astonished at the amount of service needed for mental health and social well-being. So we had to double the staff that we had at that time, not thinking that that was going to be the issue. But you're absolutely right. A child can't learn when there are all these things going on in their heads. Now, do we have it at every school? No. But we've got to work toward getting those services to those kids.
That's terrific. We have time for just one more question, I think.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Bassler from the Illinois Public Health Institute, and I wanted to just try to connect up a little bit with the meeting we had last week called Healthy Communities, and maybe this is a question mostly for Benita, but all of you. How do you think about health when you think this sort of holistic quality of life approach? And I don't mean health care and health centers, but I got to believe that what you're doing has health outcomes. People are healthier, they're not as sick, they're less obese, they're less chronic disease, better able to work. If health is going to be an outcome of what you're doing, but I think it's also needs to be thought about sort of intentionally as an input that people can work better, they're better able to work, they're better able to succeed in school, their children are better able to succeed in school if they're not suffering from chronic disease or asthma or diabetes and so on. So how does health figure into that quality of life approach that you have? And are you intentional about it? And do you measure your work and sort of, is your community getting healthier? Is there less obesity? Is there less diabetes as a result of your work, even if you're not focused on health care?
We are very fortunate to be in an area geographically where we have quite a few health care facilities, obviously University of Chicago Hospital, and we have a number of FQACs, thank you, too many acronyms. We do look at health broadly and not just in the medical sense. So what you will find that we're doing is that we have a farmer's market that QCDC is responsible for, that we brought to the community about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, trying to work with the population to make sure that they understand that there is a need for healthy vegetables and fruits and all of those types of things. So we do have that. We also have a healthy eating initiative through our schools. So you won't see, when you go to Revis, bags of Flaming Red Hots. You won't see little red fingers when you walk through the halls, because we've been intentional about trying to work with students and families about healthy eating options. We have a chef who periodically comes to the school to work with children and who also comes to our farmers market. And we also have a partnership with Chicago Botanical Gardens at Dyett High School, where we have a farm. And so it's the second largest farm in the CPS system. And so not only are the children or the students learning about agriculture and all of that, they're also they're learning about vegetables and selling them as well. So we are not directly, I guess the word would be, we're not directly looking at health in the sense that, we're responsible for outcomes and those kinds of things, but we feel that these are the types of things that we add to the puzzle that will help to create healthier communities.
I heard
in the parks, right.
And the access to the lake and the things that we're working on.
My partner reminds me about, we have a new park, relatively new, about 4 years old, Mandrake Park, and just this past a month ago, we had the mayor come down and we had it all redone, and so now that there's soccer there's a soccer field, there's a football field, there's a track, so there's all of these kinds of things as well. And then, of course, as has been pointed out, our access to the lake front as well. And we've got bridges, that's the economic development piece. See, I just forgot about that. We've got 2 new bridges that link the community to the lakefront as well.
So I know there was a question on that side of the room, but I just got to
take it.
Take it? Okay. So please, whoever was...
All right, I'm going to squeeze it in real quick. Thank you for taking the question. Again, we all work in this field of what works, and we kind of know what works with the realm of education, health, everything we talked about. Those indicators are long-term metrics. They require longitudinal studies. What we're talking about, those are the ties that actually make the community work, but that's not an economic indicator. So the question to the panel is, what are the metrics, because this is what I struggle with all the time, what are the metrics that you find helpfully negotiate the short-term versus the long-term metrics?
That's a fabulous question.
That's a great one.
Anybody?
I mean, I guess for us, on the short-term scale, we look at skills that have been attained by the individuals that we serve, jobs that they're now employed in, wages that they're in, tenure at those jobs, retention rate at 1 year of employment, and so on the short term. And on the long term, we look at really social return on investment. So this might not be attractive to you because you were talking about the longitudinal aspect of it and the fact that that can be a drag. I get that. But on our end, for SROI, what we look at is we look at cohorts of individuals that we place in permanent jobs, and we look at the taxes they're paying now, the Social Security they're paying, the sales tax spend that they now have because they have net income. We look at what society is now saving because of costs that are now avoided, recovery costs, rearrest costs, using the emergency room as your primary form of health care, unemployment costs, et cetera. And we aggregate those. That was, the last time we looked at that was 7.8 million. We look at it over a 5-year time horizon, discount it to the present value, that's about 25 million. Divide by our operating costs, and we get to sell a narrative about every dollar invested in the program we believe produces about $5.50 of value over a 5-year period. So that helps change the discourse a little bit about the economic value of the work, and it helps to create a more long-term, I guess, viewpoint on the short-term results of job acquisition.
Right, and so Nancy, just to supplement that, so we focus, like a lot of intermediaries, on the outputs, number of housing units, number of square feet, number of jobs created or retained, and dollars leveraged, additional public-private financing that's drawn to a particular transaction because of the initial funding that you provide. As we move forward, our practice is to try and conduct longitudinal studies, to your point, around that particular project or a set of interventions in that particular geography. So those are the kinds of long-term measures where you're trying to understand how much did the property taxes increase, how much additional net taxes is that particular municipality picking up. Did you gain additional ancillary business activity? So if there was just one store opened up, did it attract 2 or 3 others? What are those kinds of follow-on economic investments in that particular sub-market or micro-market, if you will? And we're finding that the best way to get at those measures is through these periodic longitudinal studies, and we have to be strategic about which ones we choose to execute.
So I just want to thank everyone in this room for participating in this in the conversation, and I hope you will join with me in thanking the panelists